everyone to Austria, as qualifying is now underway for round 7 of SRL Season 6 on the PS4 platform. And as you can see, we have 11 drivers here at the Red Bull ring, and curiously enough we are on board with a Red Bull of VP Tim Palm, and there's a few more cars out on track as we have a yellow flag with Morgan out straight out of the pit, or maybe out of turn 1, I'm not quite sure, but that is a front wing that is missing on that McLaren, and that is obviously not very fortunate, but luckily enough the lap is quite short, so he may still be able to have put 2 runs in this qualifying session. And so far, is there someone on the lap? Let's go on board with VP Tim Palm, as Marin is currently on pole with a 106.3 on the Sauber on the ultra soft tire, which is the logical tire to be on for this qualifying session. Meanwhile, let's see if VP can improve on that, as Francis goes fastest with a 106.3, as there's a Ferrari out in the gravel right after the middle sector split, which is not ideal, but on board for the remainder of the lap and opening the DRS, and it's a 106.2, which takes VP Tim to provisional pole. Meanwhile, is there someone else on the lap? Cherry crosses the line. McCready goes fastest with a 106.0 on the Forcina, so that's a very solid lap from him, as Enrico Flam and Moore both into the pits after not completing their first run on the ultra softs. Sherry very untidy, coming out of turn, well, technically it says 3, but it would be turn 2, a bit of a lockup into turn 4. Now, can he get a good line through 5? Yes, he can, very clean through the second sector split, and he's 4 tenths up, so this could be a very good lap for Cherry to Pie. Let's see what he can do on these last 2 corners of the track, as VP Tim improved 0.0, 1,000 faster than McGrady, but across the line Cherry to Pie goes, and it's only 3rd place as McGrady improves yet again, and he's the first man with a 105.9 on the ultra soft tire. Meanwhile, we're trying to get someone else on a lap. Eagle, who got a podium in the last race in Canada with the Toro Rosso. Let's see what he can do on this lap. Seems a bit slow, so he might be on his out lap. I'm not quite sure. Freddy's coming into the pits. Enrico Flam and Morg on their out lap, as the McLaren goes a bit wide into turn 3. Engelko is still in the pits without having posted any lap, and McGrady on his in lap, so is VP Tim Palm. Matt is going into the pits as well, so the first run is now over for most of the drivers, with McGrady currently leading the pack with a 105.9. Then it's VP Team Palm with a 106.0, Cherry to Pie with a 106.089, Pipmat on a 106.1, Francis and Marin both on the 106.3, then it's Eagle on a 106.7, and finally Freddy, the last guy who has set a lap time with a 107.6. Meanwhile, Enrico and Morg have started their laps, so let's go see what is the first time split for Morg in the first sector. 16.8, while Enrico Flam goes with a 16.9, so Morg currently faster between these 2. Sorry about that awkward silence, but into the end of the lap we go in on board with the McLaren. Very tempted into the last corner that might compromise his lap a little bit. In the end, it's only a 107.3, and Enrico Flam goes 107.0, so not ideal laps so far for these two guys, who obviously have had their first run compromised by mistakes. Meanwhile, Pipma is back out on track, and so is Fretty, the last man with a lap. And I think Angle is not. Angle is finally come out to play in this qualifying session in Austria with less than 4 minutes to go. So this could be a very interesting end to the qualifying. So let's go on board with the Williams driver as he prepares his final run of the session, probably 2 laps like the first run for the majority of them. And let's see if we can see someone else getting into the 105s, most likely, considering the track obviously improves throughout the session. And Pitmac goes actually back into the pits, which is interesting. But who else is on the lap that we can watch? These 3 are on their out lap. Angle is starting his, I believe. I don't know, I don't understand the timing sometimes of this game. But Francis retires, and that may have been... No, he's retiring in the pit, so that was not a crash, as I thought it had been. Meanwhile, Angle goes with a 16.6 in the first sector. There's still a yellow flag in the last sector, I'm not quite sure why. Anyway, into turn 4, the Red Bull driver goes. Very smooth indeed, as there seemed to be a change on the top of the leaderboard, but there wasn't. It's just my eyes tricking me, as it seems. Into the sector split, and it's another 16.6 apparently. Not sure quite right, Codemasters. You're tricking me. Not a fan. Anyway, into the last corner goes the Red Bull. What lap time is he gonna put? And it's a 105.7. He goes provisional pole, but obviously there's a lot of quick drivers who can challenge for that, and one of them is McCready in the Force India. Bit of a lockup into turn 4, but doesn't compromise his exit too much. Now into 5, very close to the apex, tries to get as much of a good exit as he can into 6, and now into 7, relatively smooth into there. Now only 2 corners to go, 7 and 8, very wide in the end with a bit of a weird entry, but still could be a very good lap, and it's a 1.5.8, so not quite enough, but it seems to have been an illegal lap, as he didn't quite improve his lap in the end in the standings on your left, on the left of your screen. Meanwhile, anyone else on the lap? VP apparently didn't post a great lap either. Obviously everyone relying on their second lap, as that was very close for Terry to put in the Williams at turn 1. That is certainly not going to help him on his lap, as Marin is in 7th place. Morgan still... Oh, what happened there? Was that a crash? I'm not quite sure. But VP is apparently 83 thousandths off pole, as the qualifying time ends now, and he seems to be slowing down. Yep. A lot of curb usage there from Cherry to Pie. That is not good, and that is him way off into the wall. at the exit of 6, not 6, 7, and that was the end of the qualifying for him, as Marin went second in the Sauber with a 105.8. Meanwhile, Eagle still on a lap. No, it's his end lap, so that's done. As Pitmat improved just slightly, but is only starting in 7th place in the Williams. And I believe that is everyone. I think everyone either has retired or completed their lap. So that's your qualifying results. Angle takes pole position in the Red Bull ring. Then it's Marin in the Sauber. VP Grady is third on the grid with a 105.9. Then VP is lining up alongside him with a 106.0. Cherry to Pie in the Williams is 5th with a 106.0. Eagle on the Toro Rosso goes 6th with a 106.1. Pitmat in the other Williams with a 106.1 as well. Francis in 8th place with a 106.3. Morgan with a 106.7. Enrico Flam in the Ferrari with a 107.0. And finally Fretti, the only man starting outside the top 10, with a 107.6. And it will be interesting to see if Fretti goes for a different strategy by starting outside the top 10, something that we did not see in Canada, but it could well happen here as we wait for the remaining drivers to retire from the session. But make sure you let me know in the comments section below which driver are you backing for the win of the race, and who are your podium predictions for this round 7 of the championship. Who do you think will be strongest, and who will make the most mistakes, as we've seen quite a few of them in last week's Canadian Grand Prix. So obviously it's very easy to make mistakes in dirty air and when you're under pressure or trying to pressure the car in front, so it'll still be a very interesting race to follow, especially if we see some wet weather on the following session, while we're still trying to kill some time, as finally we have the race results on your screen. And as you can see, it's an all Dutch front row, an all German second row, then finally a Scotsman in 5th place, a German in 6th, a British in 7th, another Scotsman in 8th, a Belgian in 9th, a Dutch in 10th, and finally in 11th a Brit. And sadly there's not a Portuguese. Why there's never a Portuguese in these leagues? I don't know how to approve of this. It's not even a Spanish. But anyway, time to get ready into the race, so fingers crossed it will be a cracker to watch and hopefully to commentate, as we don't want to get copyrighted. Thank you very much. And now it's time to wait for the drivers to just load themselves in and prepare for the race. Right, so it is time for the race, and as we load in, the 5 lights are starting to come on now, and they're about to go off, and there's a very late stop for everyone as McCready gets a better exit than Marin, who loses a few places off the grid. There's a bit of contact with the Red Bull, and there's more contact down at the back with Eagle, Cherry Pie and Morg, as there's moves all all over the track into turn 3. The Mercedes goes a bit deep and takes the Sauber with him, and that's a great job from the Red Bull to go up to third. Meanwhile, Anglo keeps his first place ahead of the Force India of McGrady. Great start from him. While at the back we have a few more moves as Chetapai gets past the Toro Rosso of Eagle, who may have damage as he's getting very pressurized by Fretti, and now he suddenly does after running into the back of the Williams as Fretti makes his way past, and that's a retirement from Eagle, which is not what you want to see as Pitman is in the gravel. So not an ideal start for the Williams guys, as Fretti indeed started on a different compound to make a different strategy to make it work, as Enrico Flam tries to make a move on the Sauber of Marin but can't quite make it into turn 1. However, he could have a very good run into the following corner at turn 3. Around the outside he goes. Can he make the move stick? Not quite. And he's now going to try again into turn 4. Around the outside once again as Marin refuses to give the inside to the Ferrari driver, and he keeps the position for a few seconds longer, but the Ferrari is refusing to go away, and up the inside tries the Ferrari, but it's not quite enough speed to make the move stick as Fretti gets past Chetapai, who has returned to the gravel as it seems, and there's another retirement, sadly this time around for a Williams, while the other one has pitted for super softs. Pitman now at the back of the field, quite a few seconds off the following car. Meanwhile, up ahead there's not really many changes as Angle tries to pull away from McGrady, and Chetapai makes an interesting fastest lap, I'm not gonna lie, but anyway, it's still just under a second between first and second here at Austria, but Enrico Flam has finally made a move, but it didn't last long as Marin goes back up to 5th. That is a very, very interesting battle going on as we start to have some issues with the connection, but Morgan takes the advantage of it and goes back past Enrico Flam to 6th place. Let's see if he can hold it at the end of this lap with 2 corners to go until the end of lap 3 for these guys. And there's a yellow flag, that's a Mercedes of who? It's Francis in the Mercedes, who was spun around at the last corner here at the end of lap 3 as Chetapai goes into the pits, most likely to put on the super soft tyres as Francis gets a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings. Meanwhile, Francis has left the session, so there's quite a few people leaving the session, which is quite sad. But at the front, Angle with the Red Bull keeping a safe distance and ever increasing distance as well to the Force India of McRae. Meanwhile, the other Red Bull of VP Tim is keeping his head down and trying to close up the gap to the Force India. Meanwhile, Marin in the Sauber, excuse me, has managed to pull away from both Morgan and Enrico Flam, who also lost contact with the McLaren driver as McLaren goes very wide at the last corner. That could have been very, very costly, but nevertheless keeps his position. However, he's now within, well, with less than a second of advantage over the Ferrari, so that could be very interesting in the next few laps if he keeps this gap as it is. Meanwhile, Fretti's still doing a good rhythm on those super softs as there was a spider just floating around in this on the screen but Pipma also on the super soft trying to close in into the disconnected Francis, and up ahead is the other man on the super soft Fretty. Meanwhile, Cherry to Pie back on the ultras actually, within 9 seconds of his teammate. Sadly, not much fighting going on as at the time being, as Marin gets a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings, which is obviously not what you'd like to see, especially after Canada, where we saw quite a few of them. But the gaps have now kind of stabilized a bit, with no one within DRS range of the car in front. The closest are literally McCready to Angle, which the gap is just under 1.5 seconds, and same wise to the Ferrari of Enrico Flam, who has the McLaren of Morgan just 1.5 seconds ahead of him. But that is a very beautiful camera angle from up there, as Cherry to Pie collects a 3-second time penalty as well, with McCready making a bit of a gain during that middle sector against the Red Bull of Angle Killer, so that could be very interesting at the end of the race. Meanwhile, Enrico Flam on the other hand is losing that 1 second gap, as he lost quite a bit of time. Maybe a mistake at the last corner, which cost him quite a bit of time to the McLaren in front. But Pipma is actually very close. No, but it's the ghost car of Francis, I believe. Yes, indeed it is. And not much else to say, really. Now we only have to wait for the pit stops to hopefully get some action, as Cherry to Pie collects yet another 3-second penalty, which is unfortunate considering the last one wasn't that long ago. But McRae is getting increasingly closer to the Red Bull of Angelco, and if he keeps this momentum, he might well be within DRS range into the back straight after this turn 1, 2 and 3. But for now it's just over a second, which could be crucial for any hopes of an attempt on the charge for first place in the next few laps, as obviously it's very hard to keep within Dirty Air on that middle and last sector, with the first sector being the easiest on Dirty Air. But other than that, we could see what is going on amongst the other people. As you can see, the Williams boys, the only ones to have already made a pit stop, and Cherry to Pie collects yet another penalty, so the race is not going well for the Williams driver. But here you can see the gains and losses of the driver. So Angelco, the only guy to have kept his position from the start of the race, with McRae and Tim Palm having gained positions, Marin having lost 2 places off his front row start, which was unfortunate. Morn, Enrico and Freddy all having made 4 places on their grid position, and then Pipma lost a position, Cherry to Pie lost 4, and Francis, who's still running, has lost 2, with Eagle being the first retirement of the race. As we have a yellow flag, and that's an unfortunate spin for Cherry to Pie, and that may mean a pit stop for him, as those rear tires especially, will probably be in a horrific condition, and indeed he goes into the pits, maybe this time around to put a set of super softs, or maybe even softs to try and go until the end of the race. Let's just check, as it seems they'll be putting the super softs on, and indeed it is. Meanwhile, McRae is finally under the RS range of Angle Killer, and so we could see a few opportunities for the Force India driver to take away the lead of the Red Bull on his home turf, but he doesn't seem to be close enough to try and move up into turn 4 in this lap, at least, as Tim Palm loses connection to these two up ahead, 3.8 seconds out, the gap between second and third, and Enrico Flamma has also lost contact with the McLaren of Morgan in 5th place, as they have to deal with a disconnected car, which can be quite annoying and quite distracting as well, but no harm done to the top two, at least, as they both nailed the last corner and into the RS they go, as Tim Palm collects his first 3-second time penalty, I believe, with multiple warnings, and the Force India is really close to the back of the Red Bull now, and we could potentially see now a move into turn 4, as I think he will wait to have the DRS at his disposal. However, there's nearly contact between the Force India and the Red Bull driver, but no harm done, luckily for both of them, as he managed to avoid just the rear end of the Dutchman, as Enrico Flam pits to the soft tyre, curiously enough, and he's the first man to do so, and I believe he did something similar in Canada with the Ferrari, so we'll see where he comes out. He seems to come out behind the Williams of Pip Matt, but comfortably ahead of the other Williams of Sherry, so let's see where that puts him after everyone has made the pit stops, and let's see if the undercut will be productive for the Ferrari driver. Meanwhile, Tim Palm on the other Red Bull has gone into the pits as well, as McRae has a bit of an untidy exit out of turn 1, and Tim Palm goes also to the soft tyre, so let's see what he can do on that tyre, as Marin gets past him while he's still in the pit lane, and as he comes out he'll just be under pressure of the McLaren, actually behind the McLaren of Mold, so that could be not very helpful for his undercut chances, as he tries to go around the outside of turn 3, and Morgan doesn't really impose a big problem to the German on the Red Bull, so that's an easy move done. And next up will be Marin in the Sauber on the ultra soft tyres, who is yet to pit. Meanwhile, at the front of the grid, Angle Killer goes for the undercut, trying not to be surprised by the Force India driver, and we'll see where he comes out relatively to his teammate, who has made an overtake but still was in better tyres, and he leaves the pit lane also on the soft compound. Will he come out behind? Oh, there's a spin from a Williams, and that's Cherry once again. Very unfortunate race for him. Meanwhile, at the front, Angle Killer comes just in front of Marin and the Sauber, and so he keeps second place, theoretically first, if McGrady has a poor lap or just not a good enough lap to jump him in the pits, as he surely will be coming on at the end of this lap to make sure he doesn't lose too much time to the Red Bull with his undercut. Meanwhile, Marin shouldn't be on this side for too long either, as Enrico collects a time penalty for multiple warnings, and indeed McGrady goes into the pits. What tyres will he be going on to? Probably the softs, as I think an alternative strategy at this point will be a bit risky, and indeed it is the yellow wall tyre into the Force India, and Marin also pits, with Charity collecting another time penalty. And where will the Force City come out? Crossing the white line, but probably just a warning for the driver, and he comes out comfortably ahead of Tim Palm, but the gap is indeed smaller than it was before the pits, so maybe we can see an attempt to chase and try and overtake McGrady from Tim Palm. Meanwhile, Morgan has also pit in the McLaren, and he has seemed to come out ahead of Enrico Flam, so the undercut not working for the Ferrari driver, sadly. But Pipmat on the super softs, however, seems to be under threat from that McLaren on the softs. However, he should still have a bit of a margin due to the tyre compound difference, despite being on all the tyres in the McLaren. But those are literally the smallest gaps out on track as of the time being. That and the Red Bull, the German behind McGrady in the Force India, which is just over a second for now, but Morgan is within a second and possibly in DRS range when the DRS detection point comes on for the start finish straight, and indeed he is. So DRS for the McLaren, which could be very useful into the back straight after turn 3, as a McLaren gets in the way, and really those distinct cars can be really annoying when faced into braking zones. But for now everything good, and let's see if the McLaren can pull a move with a little arc up into turn 3, but it doesn't seem to be close enough to try a move into turn 4 on the Williams of the Brit. Pipmat, however, both lock up into turn 4, but everyone seems to hold it together and not go into the grass or gravel, so no problems as of now. But let's just enjoy a bit of the cinematic view as Charity retires from the race. Undoubtedly a very bad race for the Williams driver since the start of the race, but bit of a slidey exit from the last corner as the Ferrari goes a bit wide, and actually Jerry crashed at the last corner, so that is a new one. I haven't seen that one before, as Pipmat collects a 3-second time penalty as Freddie comes out of the pits on the soft compound tyre, and only 4.7 seconds behind Enrico, so maybe on the fresher tyre he could possibly catch up to the Ferrari and maybe challenge for the second place. Meanwhile, Morgan very close with Pipman, and actually makes a move into turn 4. Great move from the McLaren driver up the inside, but Pipman doesn't give up on the position as Angle Killer receives a penalty and up the inside on a better exit into 6 and 7, and he maintains the position just about. Great racing from the Williams. However, he might go into the pit, or maybe he's just defending. Around the outside goes the McLaren, and that could have been very bad, but Pipmat goes indeed into the pits. Brave move there from Morgan to get around the outside at the penultimate corner from the Williams, and up to 5th place he goes. Let's see what tyres will Pipmat go onto, as Enrico has a bit of a scruffy exit out of turn 1, but is within DRS range, so luckily for him, benefiting from the fight of the two guys ahead of him to catch up and maybe take some of that action for himself as well. But let's see what he can do at the back of that McLaren. At the front, Angle Killer maintains his lead. McGrady just under 2 seconds behind the Red Bull, and the other Red Bull another 2.2 seconds behind him. Now it should be quite interesting because of the penalties, because we know Angle Killer has one. I'm not sure Grady has, so let's quickly check who has a penalty. Marin, Cherry, Angle, Cherry, Tim Palm, Enrico, Pip Matt, and Angle Killer. So Angle has 6 seconds worth of penalties, as Freddy gets 1 for multiple warnings. So this means, as it stands, Angle Killer with 6 and Tim Palm with 3. If the race ended now, McGrady would win in the Force India, ahead of Tim Palm, who would finish just 6 tenths ahead of Angle Killer because of the total of the penalties gotten from H. So, like Canada, we have a second place who just needs to run his own race, knowing that the car in front has indeed got penalties, and he just needs to keep his head down, manage his tires, manage his fuel, make sure he doesn't make too many mistakes and doesn't get further away than 6 seconds of the Red Bull, and he should, in theory, be fine for the win of the race, unless any penalty is revoked by the stewards post-race. But meanwhile, the Ferrari is yet again trying to get closer and closer to the McLaren of Morn, just half a second separating them, as Marin gets his second time penalty of the race, which is obviously not very helpful for him, but with a comfortable gap over to the McLaren in 5th, he should be fine until the end of the race, except if he makes a big mistake in these last 16 laps of the race, as this is pretty much the only fight we have going on. Everyone has made their pit stops. Pit Matt has even made 2, but he is on the soft tyre for the time being, so he will be going into the last lap of the race without any issues, as Enrico was very close there to make a move up turn 3 and maybe try and move around the outside of turn 4, as it did make a bit of contact, and that might well be a bit of end plate damage, and indeed it is for the Ferrari driver, which can be a bit of a pain to deal on his last stint, especially in dirty air, as it will cost him valuable turning ability. But let's see if he can keep within range of the McLaren, as he goes very wide and very slowly. Is he letting the Ferrari through? It seems like it, or else there's some problem with the McLaren. But Enrico Flam goes up to 5th, a bit wide at turn 1. Maybe Morn felt responsible for that damage into turn 4. Whatever it was, he's demoted to 6 now, but we'll possibly try and move into turn 4, as he's very close, but he loses it, and that may be the full front wing gone. Luckily, I don't think it is. It's only a big part of the end plate though, and that will be very, very costly. We could possibly see the McLaren pitting to replace that front wing, and probably put a set of ultra softs to go to the end of the race, but obviously not what he wanted, as we could see a tasty fight coming his way and Enrico's in the Ferrari. But as you can see, the McLaren absolutely atrocious to drive now, with that end plate missing, being overtaken by Pip Matt in the Williams. So very unfortunate for the McLaren, but that promotes as well Freddie into 6th place, so a pretty decent result, as Enrico Flam collects yet another penalty, so that could promote Freddy even further up to 5th place if he keeps a consistent rhythm and doesn't lose too much time to Enrico or gets more penalties. One pits into the super soft tyre, as we can see now on the screen. However, I don't think he's changed the wing. I don't think their crew actually changed their wing, and indeed it didn't, and that's going to be another painful lap for him, as he will surely pit at the end of this lap again, as Tim Palm pitted for ultras. Did he get any issue that we didn't get on camera? I don't know if something happened to the German, but he's still comfortably in 3rd place, 7 seconds ahead of the Sauber of Morin. And meanwhile, at the front of the field, McGrady's back again within the RS range of the Red Bull, but just keeping himself comfortably there, not taking too many risks to try and overtake, as you all surely know about the Germans, not the Germans, the Dutchman's penalties. So he just needs to control his pace behind him and not take unnecessary risks unless he takes more penalties, as Morgan gets a 5-stop go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Sadly, another forced pit stop, as the team didn't change his front wing, and into the ultra soft he goes. The obvious choice at this point in time, with only 12 laps to go, as there's not much happening other than the chase from McGrady behind the Red Bull of Anglo-Killer. So at the end of lap 24 we have Anglo-Killer leading from the Force India of McGrady, the German Tim Palm running comfortably in 3rd with his fresh new ultra softs. Morin runs 4th after starting on the front row of the grid with his Sauber. Enrico Flam 5th in the Ferrari. Freddy doing a very solid race after starting in the super soft tyre outside the top 10, and now running on the soft compound with 3.7 seconds of a gap to the car behind, which is Pipma, who sadly had to pit twice due to mistakes, and he's now running on the soft tyre as well. And finally Morgan, the last proper running car, with after facing a few issues with his front wing, running in 8th on the ultra softs, and hopefully running until the end of the race, as the marshal is already holding the checkered flag. But I'm afraid you'll have to wait another 11 laps till we can see it waved. But at the front, Tim Palm has already extended his gap to Marin, so that should be an easy 3rd place for the German in the Red Bull, who's running on the ultra soft, so obviously pulling away, and shouldn't have too many issues getting till the end of the race. At the front, the Force India is ever so close, but not close enough to the Red Bull. However, if he gets a good run out of turn 3, we could potentially see a move, as he holds back to try and not make a move, but gets very close in the exit to the Red Bull. But he seems to have a worse exit despite the proximity, and it is indeed too far away to try and move, as I believe Marin got another penalty, or maybe it was Morn on the ultra soft, pushing to close the gap to Pipma, which is on 48.6 seconds. I'm afraid that gap won't come down enough to make any changes to the positions. But Freddy, on the other hand, very, very close to the Ferrari of Enrico Flam, and Pipma is not that far away either. So we could potentially see a move on track, because obviously we know about the penalties, but we could see a move, excuse me, on track between these two, and maybe even the participation of the Williams, as these two are still fighting. And McGrady has finally gone for a move, and he surely will try around the outside of turn 4. Maybe he can pull it off. Let's see who breaks later, as both lock up. Still around the outside he goes. The next corner is to the left, so advantage to McGrady if he just manages to keep himself alongside. But great defending from Angle Killer to remain in the lead of the race. Very good racing there, as we missed the initial part, but definitely a very aggressive racing from both of them, showing both really want this win in Austrian soil. But for now, advantage to the Red Bull, who despite his penalties is not making it any easier for the Force India, as we could clearly see how much later McGrady is braking for the corners, trying to get as close as possible to make sure he can attempt a move. However, let's see about the exit turn 3. Will he be close enough as Freddy collects another time penalty? Marin goes into the pits, which is a curious call. Let's see if he comes out ahead of Enrico in the Ferrari, as Freddy is very close. Freddy has been overtaken by Pitmat. We missed that because of the action going on at the front of the grid, sadly. But Pitmat is very close to the Ferrari, as we're waiting to see if Marin is coming out ahead of the Ferrari, and he is indeed very comfortably, as Pitmat looks to the inside into turn 1 but thinks better of it, and with a much better run as Enrico loses the back of the car very worryingly at the exit of turn 1. That could have been catastrophic for both him and Pitmat. Again looking up the inside, but he gets a much better turn in apex than the Ferrari, and he could potentially see a move into turn 4 as Enrico squeezes him. But up the inside there's a bit of contact. Enrico just turning in, not really noticing the Williams on the inside, I believe, as he's still trying to keep his momentum, and he has indeed secured 5th place as Enrico maintains his damaged front wing, and Freddy is not too far behind him and could even try an attempt of a move into turn 1, as someone doesn't seem to be. That's the McLaren Moore, which is not very far away up ahead of them, but obviously he's going to be lapped, so it shouldn't interfere too much on the racing of these three. Meanwhile, at the front, McGrady's continuously getting closer and closer as Tim Pom collects another penalty, and we could see a move around the outside into turn 3 from the Force India. He goes to the outside, braking later, slight lockup from both of them, but the Red Bull squeezes him ever so slightly at the exit, but still around the outside into turn 4. We've seen this attempt before. Can the Red Bull hold itself? But the Force India just has the ability to brake later, and it seemed to be moved on. But Angle is not giving up. Around the outside into 5. It's still around the outside. That is an amazing defending move, and it's still side by side, and that was pretty much 4 corners side by side, and still advantage for the Red Bull as for the time being, as McGrady wasn't ready to let go of the action. He wanted to go side by side for one more corner, but not being fast enough to do so. Anyway, slideless turn 1 to Angle Killer could provide McGrady another opportunity into turn 3. Around the outside, defending the inside with everything he's got to Red Bull. Another lockup for both drivers. Decent exit for the Force India. Angle Killer defending once again the inside, commits to the outside of McGrady, and could we see potentially a definite move? He goes too deep every time, he just breaks later, but it seems to be too late to maintain the position, and so the Red Bull keeps his lead with less than 5 laps to go, and sadly due to the penalties we know who's going to win this race, but it's a very, very interesting fight as Freddy still remains himself right all over the back of the Ferrari driver of Enrico, and takes a look at the inside for turn 1 but thinks better of it. McGrady, while it's just, we see a replay every lap, Angle Killer defending the inside with everything he's got, McGrady trying to keep around the outside and make the move by braking later, but this time around with the RS I believe he finally has got it, defending the inside now into turn 4, and he has the move done if he hadn't gone too deep, but I believe that is indeed move done, so fair play to McGrady, a great move, great fight from these two, fair play to both of them. We haven't seen contact either, which could be a problem, we were pretty close to seeing that as well, but that's McGrady into the lead of the race with 4 laps to go now, and we'll see if Angle Killer has anything left to say about this, as he uses the RS on the start finish straight, tries to get closer to the Force India to try and move at the back straight. Meanwhile, Frey is really close, and he makes a move on Enrico Flam, it seems, as he tries to defend. Let's just have a quick look. It was into turn 3, as we've seen many attempts before, especially by these two, but it seems that Angle Killer has little to offer at this point, just keeping himself behind the Force India, as both of these drivers should probably now try and conserve those tyres to make sure they go until the end of the race without losing too much time, as obviously Tim Palm is on the Ultrasoft behind them, just 9 seconds back of the top 2, as McGrady didn't seem to have the best exit of the penultimate corner there, and allowing Angle Killer to get ever so closer to the back of that Pink Panther car, but it doesn't seem to be close enough. However, into turn 3, let's see how close he gets, if it tries to pressure McGrady into a mistake. It doesn't seem to be braking late enough to try and move, as Fretty seems to have gone into the grass, maybe forced out wide by Enrico Flam, as Marion gets another penalty, as Angle Killer looks up the inside into turn 4 but doesn't have the tyres or the brakes to stick into that move and backs out of it at the last minute. So it's still advantage to the Force India as we get closer and closer to the end of what has been maybe not as action-packed of a Grand Prix as we would want to, but still a great fight between these two until the very end of the race, as they lap the Ferrari of Enrico Flam, and 2 laps to go now, and that's a very squirmy exit from McGrady, and that could mean that Angle Killer takes the lead of the race again, but on the outside, so McGrady may have a saying in all this, keeps the outside and has a better exit, better traction out of turn 3, so he retains the lead for the time being, as sadly it's really sad that this won't make a difference towards who wins the Austrian Grand Prix today, but it's still a great fight between these two throughout the whole race from start to finish. They've always been in the top two, always pretty much close to each other. I think I've never seen the gap go farther than 3 seconds, maybe not even that. So fair play to them to sticking to each other throughout all race long and giving me something to commentate on as we start the last lap with Freddie accumulating another time penalty in 7th place. But McRae seems to have given up on the attempt of winning on track, and obviously it's understandable as he spent so many laps on the tier trying to make the move, as there's a few more spiders invading our screen. But it seems that it has been sealed, the win on track for Angle Killer, which will convert to a win for McGrady after all penalties are applied to the drivers, I believe, as I haven't seen McGrady get any time penalty for any reason. But here we approach the last 2 corners on board with the Red Bull. Amazing race, sad that it won't mean a win in the end because of the penalty, but still a great performance by the Dutchman in the Red Bull. Started on pole, dominated, well, didn't dominate, but led most of the laps of this race and wins on track as McGrady finishes 2nd. Tim Palm finishes in 3rd in the Red Bull. Marin's coming home in 4th place with the Sauber, as Enrico and Freddie already finished by being a lap behind. Meanwhile, Morgan is waiting to cross the line as well, as Marin gets a final warning and a final penalty just before crossing the line in 4th. And here we see pit map, which is just in front of Morgan on the track, but a lap ahead of him, and he's going to cross the line to get 5th place in the end. Tough race for the Williams after having to pit twice, but still a decent recovery from him, as we saw a few crashes there in sector 1. I have no idea what happened post race, but here we have the final results of the race, and we'll see who took the win for the Austrian Grand Prix. And it was actually Angle Killer. So that must mean McGrady had the same amount of penalties or more than Angle Killer. So Angle Killer actually retains his win on track. The Dutchman finishing ahead of the 2 Germans of the Force India and his teammate. So maybe we were seeing a fight for the win the whole time and we didn't really know about it. Maybe I read wrongly into it, but here are your final results, with Angle Killer taking the win in the Red Bull on home turf for the team. McGrady finishes 2nd in the Force India after starting 3rd. Tim Palm gets the last podium place ahead of Marin, Pipma, Enrico, Flam, Fretti, Morgan, and then the all retirees in form of Hamilton, Stroll, and I can't really remember the rest of them. But I believe that will be the end of this stream. Thank you so much to all those who joined me for this Austrian Grand Prix. In the end, not as much of as action-packed throughout the whole field, but an amazing race-long fight between the Red Bull and the Force India, which decided to win in the last 2 laps. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thank you so much for joining me, and make sure you join us next week for round 8 of this SRL Season 6. Take care.